Surcharges for using your credit card are popping up everywhere for flights, concert tickets, car parking, council rates, even in some shops. The Prime Minister's come back with a horde of bills he has to pay. But should you pay more just for paying this way instead of EFTPOS or cash? Australia says no. And from today, we'll limit extra charges to the amount it actually costs to process the transaction. Bernard Hickey is on a crusade here for change. He's with us now in our Wellington studio. Good morning, Bernard. First, how much does it cost retailers or agents or even a government department each time they process one of these credit card payments?
Well, the credit card industry sources I talk to say it costs between 1% and 2%, and that's the cost that the Reserve Bank of Australia has said is the basic cost that has to be covered in Australia, so between 1% and 2%. But at the moment, particularly when you buy an airline ticket or you go through a credit card system in a cab or go to a hotel, some hotels, you're paying often a lump sum cost, which might be, let's say, $3 or $4 or $5. Which is fine if you're paying, you know, a couple $100 for the ticket. But if it's only $40 or $50 for a ticket, you know, we're talking 5–10%, and that's way too much.
Yes, and even more sometimes. Now, often, though, the biggest gripe I have with this is that we don't have an alternative. We can't go and do the EFTPOS. I mean, I mentioned government departments. Well, there we could take our payment down. But if you're buying, I don't know, tickets online, that might be the only option you have.
You're right. A lot of people buy their things online these days, particularly airline tickets, and this is where it hits most people most of the time. When you buy through Air New Zealand and Jetstar, and they're the only choices we have really in New Zealand, you have to pay by credit card, really, because they do give a choice. They give a thing called Poly, which allows you to pay directly from your bank, but the banks themselves have said you shouldn't use Poly because it's risky. So there's no choice. You have to pay by credit card. Air New Zealand charges a surcharge of $4 per ticket per person, and if you're booking for a family, you know, we're talking large sums of money here just for the credit card surcharges.
And of course, so all up, this is what's prompted Australia now to act. So they're introducing effectively a limit.
Yeah, they're saying you can charge for your credit card use, but only what it costs you to use that credit card. So 1% to 2% on the whole. So 1% for MasterCard and Visa, 2% for American Express and others. However, we just heard today that some of the people who are charging for credit cards, in particular Jetstar, have said, oh, we're not going to call this charge a credit card surcharge, we're going to call it a booking fee. And you see this a lot with the likes of Ticketek and Ticketmaster, where they're essentially charging something extra for what should be a basic service. Just to give you a comparison, if you walked into a hotel and the hotel said, we're going to charge you for the power you're using, you wouldn't accept it. But somehow we accept it for credit cards. Just doesn't make sense.
It's because we can't go to another hotel down the road often. That's probably, you know, again, it's the lack of competition or the lack of way of paying in a different way. So bottom line is, surely we should follow suit here in New Zealand as far as this Australian, legislation's going.
Well, in Australia, the Reserve Bank has control of these credit card charges and has acted pretty decisively to stop it. But in New Zealand, it's not so clear who actually controls these, or if there is any control. The Commerce Commission did a deal with the banks and the credit card companies 3 years ago to give them freedom to put in place these credit card surcharges, and is reviewing some aspects of it. But doesn't seem to have the direct control or authority to ban these surcharges, and certainly the Commerce Commission needs to look at the fairness of these surcharges in New Zealand, and customers need to kick up a stink with their their airline, their hotel, their cab, and say, hang on a minute, I'm prepared to be using my credit card, but it doesn't cost 10 or 20%, more like 1 or 2%.
Yeah, fair enough. And then, of course, we'll have to tackle the grotesquely high booking fees, which they'll introduce were we to win. Bernard Hickey, thank you very much for your time this morning.